much done eating or finishing up at the end, so we're going to get things started here. The first person I want to come up and talk, and he's going to hopefully speak with some air of expertise, and because he was there in the middle of the crucible on Saturday at the state convention. So I'm going to have Senator Lindsey come up and speak right now about some of those things. Senator.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm going to be, completely honest. I didn't know for sure if we were going to have this discussion tonight, so I'll do my best. But I probably should have made some notes or something. So I have to actually start kind of in the middle of the story, and if we have to have further explanation from folks that were involved. The reason I say that is I wasn't present for some of what happened in the lead up to convention. For instance, I wasn't able to make it down here on the 15th of February. In between that time and the Friday night before convention, I didn't have much communication with anybody that was involved in this, but I can kind of pick up there and tell you that, what I was told shortly before convention happened, either on Thursday or it may have been Friday afternoon, that the state had a list of delegates from Hillsdale, and that it was the list that was provided from right here. And surprisingly, in my mind, the person who told me this said that there wasn't any controversy or any challenge. And I said, that seems strange because, we know we've had a conflict going on here for years now. And so I don't, some of that stuff I think to me is at least still a mystery, but there may be others involved that know. This happened at the same time that the leadership change of the MRP was happening, right? So Karama was being replaced with Hoekstra, and there were new people handling things, and I don't know if it was about the flow of information, because there were other counties across the state that were in an entirely different situation, that because they refused to recognize the change in leadership, they never reported information up to the administration, and that sort of deprived their counties the ability to even send delegations up. So I didn't know if it was related to that the other group had never sent their information in. I don't know, but I do know that by Friday night, it reached a point where somebody had figured out that there was a discrepancy here between what information had been provided and what the two groups at least wanted to advocate for themselves. So what that led to was, the other group saying, we do want there to be a challenge, we want our delegates to go to the convention, instead of the ones from this group that were on the list at that point. And as I understand it, that led pretty late in the evening on Friday to an emergency meeting of the Credentialing Committee. The Credentialing Committee, under the convention rules, they have the job of taking these sorts of challenges and then looking at the situation and making a vote on who's going to be credentialed into the convention. Those are private meetings, and I didn't get to participate, but I did get some feedback afterwards. And the ultimate decision of the Credentialing Committee was to not change the list that they were working with at that point, which affirmed this group was, starting out Saturday morning was going to be credentialed into the convention. Some of this, by the way, guys, usually I get to get up here and talk about, I want to save the Second Amendment and stuff like that, a lot more fun. Some of this is going to get a little bit boring. I don't know if we got coffee back here, it's rules discussion. But even though the Credentials Committee is the body that is responsible for making these decisions in the lead up to a convention, the standard rule is that every convention body ultimately has the say about who they're going to credential in. And the way that works, you've seen it, if you've attended conventions, that there's supposed to be a credentialing committee report, and the body is supposed to affirm or modify. I guess they could even reject it. If they reject a credentials committee report, then you don't have a convention. But so what happened is Friday night, credentials committee made their decision but there was a lot of discussion that maybe it would have to be something that the convention itself would reconsider the next morning and have a vote on the floor of who the overall body from the 5th District thought was appropriate to be seated. Then I got up Saturday morning and got a message from the district chair. And it was a little bit vague, but the spirit of it was that it looks like that decision from Friday night had been reversed and that the other group's delegates would be seated. And so I wanted immediately to understand that. I was on my way to Grand Rapids at that time, early in the morning. I got up there, tracked down the district chair and some other people who were in leadership positions. And the problem, I'm not going to give you the whole, there was a multi-hour and pretty intense debate and discussion among leaders that included myself, Lance was there, John Smith was there for part of it, a lot of other people that you probably wouldn't recognize from state party. But I won't tell you all of the words that I used that my mother would not be proud of. But you know, I got pretty heated at certain points. But the reason was because it became clear to me that there were people that were mostly out of concern that the state party could end up in having a legal liability or something like that because of a court order. They were really concerned about seating delegates from this group, and they were advocating basically to unilaterally replace the delegates with a different group of delegates. And in so doing, my interpretation of that is it would be a direct violation of the rules because, as I had just explained, going up until the moment convention starts, the only body that can really change those lists is the credentialing committee. So I'll give you an example. I think I said this so many times. If they wanted to call Saturday morning another emergency meeting of the credentialing committee and plead their case, have at it. See if they'll meet. See what your argument is and where it goes. But short of that, it was clear in my mind that the list provided by the Credentials Committee should be the starting point of the convention. It should be the presumption of who's going to be credentialed in. And ultimately we prevailed. It was quite an intense argument with a lot of people, but ultimately we prevailed in getting people to recognize that those rules should be followed, that the Credentials Committee report should be the starting point for the convention. And at that point, I wasn't, it was split up at different locations in the hotel, but the delegation from this group did start to receive their credentials, and they went on the floor. And that's, it's like a checkpoint scenario where you're not really allowed to do that unless they have accepted that you're part of the group and you're coming in. And then at that point is when I totally betrayed all of you, pulled the rug out. I get a laugh? No, some people have been saying this. But in reality, what happened is, from those discussions, both with, all the way up to some of the senior leaders in the party, I think there was, a compelling argument made that if you stick with that as the final answer, that basically, at the bare minimum, it opens the door for somebody like Meininger to go and try to argue again in court, and we know that they like doing that. And it sort of became a trade-off of saying, you might know where you stand, and you might be entirely right in where you stand, but how much value do you get out of, getting your cake and eating it too, if there's a way to say, can we avoid that problem? And so we went and initially we wanted to confirm with a couple of lawyers, including the general counsel, to make sure that what was going on Saturday wasn't something that would trigger any sort of legal issues. And that conversation turned into a conversation that was about, can we make some sort of compromise that would make sure that nobody leaving that day felt like there was any problem that needed to go beyond the convention floor. And that's when I came back to the group of delegates that came from this group, and I said to them, I'm going to leave it up to you guys. We won the fight, but I'm going to leave it up to you. Would you voluntarily be willing to trade out positions If so, what would that look like? Are there things that are important to you that you'd want to communicate to the other side, and that would make it worth your while? Beyond the fact that you're basically going to be solving a problem for some of the senior leadership at the party. You're going to be solving a problem for me, frankly, because if it did become a big problem for other people, they're going to say, well, you're the one who fought for this, So I asked that question. I didn't say this has to happen, and I was like, actually, people will tell you, I was kind of like crying because or at least misting up because it was touching. A lot of people that were from your group were like, look, if this is going to help solve this problem and it's going to take some of the heat off the whole situation, like, we'll step up. It was kind of like, we'll sacrifice ourselves sort of moment. And so, I think the requests that were made by the group at that point were also very telling. And I've told this story to many people. The requests that were made by the group were, the top two that I think were the most critical were, one was a request to go back to the formula that had been used in the past for precinct delegate allocations, right? So if Brent in his position is going to have the ability and the clerk's going to accept his paperwork to set the number of delegates, a lot of people here would just like to see a fair election for delegates in the next August election, right? So instead of arbitrarily suppressing the number of people that are allowed to participate in that process, it would be about reverting back to the old formula that, as I understand it, has been used for a long time. And the other request was to have their leadership, and we know that the clerk there is very involved in their group, to go to the clerk and advocate in no uncertain terms that there's no funny business with these affidavits of people that are running for precinct delegate this year. That if somebody wants to run and they fill their paperwork out properly, that nobody's going to play games and reject it. Those were easy things for them to agree to. The person I was talking to was actually Susie Avery. Brent was not there, but he was on the phone with her and said, I'm okay with whatever Susie comes up with. And so went back to the group, and I'll fast forward and get through some of this, that basically we, brought that back, and at that point there were people who had been identified and volunteered. I know the Rutans were two of them. I don't remember who else. There were 4 people total. But again, they voluntarily said, we'll step out, we'll trade. We think this is a good value proposition. So the way that had to work mechanically was when the convention opened up, the chair said, I'm going to accept the motion to accept the Credentials Committee report. Somebody moved it. Once it was up for debate, I raised my hand and I said I moved to amend the Credentials Committee report by striking the original delegation from Hillsdale and replacing them with the following 13 names. And I just read out 9 of our names and 4 names that they had provided. And there was a very brief, I wouldn't even call it debate, because basically the chair turned to me and said, do you have anything to say about this? And I said, yeah, we worked out a solution here that everybody in leadership, from all the senior leadership of the party to the group that I'm sitting here with, to even the other group, has said, we're all comfortable with this. So to everybody in the district who came in here this morning thinking that we're facing a powder keg that's about to explode, vote yes if you'd rather just get on with the convention and not have an explosion. And everybody was quite appreciative of that. And I think, so at that point, there was a brief pause, and a re-credentialing process happened to get those 13 people in. I think, just a few takeaways, and then I think someone said that maybe people had questions about this, so we'll just open it up. But I think a few takeaways from it is that, after the entire convention was done, the state committee, the 106 or 107 members, that the leadership team of the state party, they had to meet to to accept the results of the convention. And at the beginning of that meeting, the chairman of the Michigan Republican Party, Pete Hoekstra, started out with some remarks from the chairman. And the very first thing I think he said was, I want to tell you guys, we had a situation this morning with Hillsdale County. And it was set up to be a really big problem for all of us. But instead of becoming a really big problem for all of us, the people from that county, the people from the district got together and solved the problem. And that is what we need to do as a party, because we have an election coming up that we need to win. He talks a lot, and I agree with him, about how the job between now and November is to elect Donald J. Trump president. But I just tell that story because I think, it was notable enough all the way up to the senior leadership. And then throughout the day, the other takeaways I would share is that, leaders from other counties that historically, and even right now, stand with what we've been doing, they still are deeply appreciative of seeing a group of people that are willing to say, yes, we know what the situation is. We know what the truth of things are, but we're willing, to take steps to make it so that not everybody else has to share, a whole chaotic situation. And people were deeply appreciative of that. A lot of people I talked to on the floor were blown away by this concept that, when you come to a negotiating position and you say, like, what do you want? You want money? You want power? You want to... No, what your group said is, we would like a fair election, please. Right? And this blew people away. Kind of tells us what we need to know about the situation in Hillsdale, right? So very last thing, and I will just, if people do have questions, I'll say is that, I'm also fully aware, I'm not completely naive, right? There's no written contract in stone with, a signature and blood on this stuff, but, so, one of the first things people said to me is like, will they honor it? I don't know. I mean, time will tell, but I'm hopeful, right? I mean, I think it means something that we know that this was said, and I don't think they're going to dispute that it was said. They might dispute how much authority they think Susie had to shake hands and say for sure that's what we're going to do. Were we advocating for that? So, that's just one question I want to get ahead of, is that, it may not be the way things play out, but I think that as you go and talk to your community, you'll be able to continue to say to them, like, we've made every good faith effort we can. We're not trying to perpetuate a fight here. We want to stand by our principles and our values, and we've always said anybody's welcome that shares those and wants to fight for them. But we're also, the adults in the room, I guess, is the way to put it. So, do folks have questions for me about what you've heard about Saturday or what transpired? Steve?
Well, I want to go back to when those folks were voted by over 2,000 precinct delegates, and they were voted out of the Republican Party. It was a complete unanimous vote, right? So by allowing them in, and I understand, we're handing out the olive leaf or the olive branch, whatever you want to call it. What happened to that majority vote to throw those people out of the Republican Party? Because that is a principle that's written in the policies and procedures. I mean, the vote was made, it was unanimous that they would be thrown out. So then how do we back up and allow this to happen when it wasn't just us that voted them out? There was a multitude of precinct delegates that agreed with us. So what happens to their vote? I mean, have we now stepped on all them people too by doing this, by extending the olive branch? So my point here is when we make a policy, and we got a line in the sand, or did we just put a ribbon up?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think this is one that I saw in several chats that people were interested in, and there's a couple of elements to unpack about it. Number one, if you go back, is everybody familiar with what Steve's talking about, the resolution that was passed last year? So number one, you need to understand that the resolution was adopted by the full convention when you say there were 2,000 people, and I was frustrated by this because I went and asked the chair afterwards, but there was no do-over on it, but it was something that when it came to the full convention, it was passed under unanimous consent, and what they were doing was adopting the reports from every caucus. Traditionally, a report from the caucus only includes the business of the caucus that's on the agenda, which is the election of state committee members from that district and the district committees. And so normally at every state convention, every 2 years, that involves a caucus on Friday and a convention on Saturday, people are used to saying this is a procedural thing where 5th district voted on who their leadership is going to be for the next 2 years and who they're going to send to state committee. And of course, we as a convention body are going to accept their decision, whoever they elected. And so it was brought up under unanimous consent. And in parliamentary procedure, that means instead of having a procedure you usually see where you say, I'll accept a motion to adopt this report. Okay, I'll accept a second. Is there any discussion? And then you see if there's debate on the floor. Instead of doing that, business that happens under unanimous consent looks like this. Without objection, I will adopt the report. Okay, the report's adopted. Very few people, I'm just gonna be honest with you, you wanna think about like the fairness of what happened and you wanna go argue with people, did the state convention really take this up and say we're putting a line in the sand? I had no idea that the resolution was gonna be, that the whole report was gonna be taken up under unanimous consent, but it was. And so so I had both pointed out to people that it is true that nobody objected to the report. At the same time, nobody made a motion with a second and had debate on the topic and said, this is what you're actually doing it. And I'll be honest, you can go across the convention, you can go to other districts and ask people, did you know that you were adopting this? And they'll just say, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? On the other hand, let me finish my point of this. On the other hand, when it was adopted by the caucus, there was no question. There was a very robust debate. There were a lot of people that spoke about it. I spoke about it. I got in trouble. I was on Facebook famous for a while. But we brought it up and people had a healthy back and forth debate, and then we did do a voice vote. I was chairing that meeting, and it was an overwhelming affirmative vote for it. And people who were opposed could have called division and asked for a roll call, but I think even they realized there was no point because there were only a few voices that said no to it. So the spirit of your question is they adopted this. Is it binding? What does it mean to go back on it? Did we go back on it? Well, I would ask you this. If the only body that really debated it and voted on it was the 5th District Caucus, right? Then number one, why wouldn't the 5th District Caucus this time around have every authority to decide what they wanted to decide going forward? It's not like it was the 10 Commandments written in stone that said you can never change it. One more thing to think about with this, and I said it to a few people we were meeting beforehand, is I believe that the resolution said a very strong statement. I think it was very clear in it. I think there was a purpose behind it. But I do challenge anybody here, if you want to crack open the rules, if you want to start with Robert's rules, if you want to go through the convention rules, if you want to go through the district bylaws, the state bylaws, I would challenge anybody to find where we have spelled out the mechanism that actually allows a resolution like that. Well, let me put it this way. Where does the power to use a resolution like that to bind the activities of the party, where does it derive? Because traditionally these things derive from, if you're in local government, there might be a charter that says we're empowered to do this through this mechanism, etc. This one, we knew when we were doing it that it was uncharted territory. It was part of the debate. I think that it's a powerful statement. I think that it does matter. But I think it's very hard, and you can go sit with the general counsel of the Michigan Republican Party right now and try to make a case to them of why that binds the action of the party. I remember back then some people making some arguments and just like saying that this is something for it to have any real enforcement may have to end up in court. Maybe it would, but it's not on its face obvious what power the resolution had. John, you got something to add on that point?
Yes, if I could real quick. One of the things is that was voted out in caucus. That's the body politic. body politic said, yes, we accept that. Saturday, the body politic could have said the same thing. When they knew that those were coming in, they could have said, hey, wait a minute, because they all have, I passed out resolutions to everybody. They could have said that, but they also understood that in that body politic, we were doing some healing. And so they were gracious enough to not bring a motion on the floor to have them thrown out because of the resolution. That's just as much a vote as what that resolution had a year ago. That was the body politic saying, okay, you guys take care of your business, we're going to allow you to do it. So that was just as much binding Saturday as what the resolution was a year ago.
And I would like to add, we have new leadership. That caucus has a bunch of new people that don't know what's going on. And to be honest with you, they applauded us for doing it.
And just to put a final button on that, right? I mean, I understand the sentiment here is to say, if somebody was, you know, had whatever action taken against them, this is what the document says, right? I would go back and say, I think I said this in one of the chats, I don't even buy the interpretation that the caucus on Saturday was actually taking a position either supporting or like removing that document. I just don't think it was on the table. I think the way that credentialing in a body works is they can decide to credential anyone they want. I mean, anyone. It's up to them. And even when you get into the debate of like, well, how could you be a delegate if you didn't go through a convention at the county level or whatever, the body gets to decide that. I mean, I think the way I put it in chat was, I mean, if they think that there's a compelling reason why they want to seat Michelle Obama at a Republican convention, right?
Not Big Mike.
Not Big Mike. Then they could do it, right? Doesn't mean she's a Republican, but you know, I don't know if that helps. You know, we can talk more about it. Did anybody else have any questions about the process, Ralph?
I just want to say, because of how long we have control of this party, which is like 6 months, until the next precinct delegate election, I think the great thing that happened in this is that if we can clear off some of the trouble and gunfire and just work on getting precinct delegates, because that's the thing that's going to make it control. The rest, I think there's other things that can be done, but I think from an overall political strategy perspective, win the elections you can and take the precinct delegates. That's it. Those are wins, not hopes, not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, I also want to talk with, you know, I mean, anybody that wants to talk about it, but you know, especially with people that are especially active in leadership roles down here, and then hopefully everybody will discuss as a group. But you know, I think there are a lot of questions to ask over the next 6 months to say what do we focus on. But I have made it very clear. The resolution, it put things in terms of a specific name of a specific organization, right? And then here's a reality for you. After the resolution was passed, a court got involved. I know how everybody in this room feels about it, but the court decided to address that same exact organization name and come to a different conclusion. The difference is the Michigan Republican Party can't go after any of you and hold you in contempt and take your money and potentially throw you in jail or anything like that. The court system can. And, you know, some of this is, right, and I mean, and I'm just trying to tie this back to Ralph's point, is that it's not about saying, I agree with the way things went, but it's about asking hard questions all the time to say, where do I want to put my energy? Do I want to put my energy into fighting another court battle? Do I want to put my energy into 6 months of, you know, running elections? Do I even, I mean, serious question for all of you. Do I even think, from what I've learned over the last 4 years, that the best and most effective way to do what we want to do, which is actually fight for underlying principles from the founding of this country, for preservation of liberty, do I actually believe in my heart that the best way to do that is to fight for precinct delegate seats and be in control of a county Republican Party?
Well, you start local. That's
No, you start local no matter what. But I'm just telling you, because I have cooled off a lot on thinking I watched and I even built organizations that were totally outside the Republican Party. Well, look, we're going to have somebody talk to us from Turning Point, right? You want to talk about a place that you won't be stuck having delegate conversations about who's going to run for what, but you can actually just get involved and go change the world by knocking doors and targeting things, right? That's what we did with some of our groups in counties where we had no collaboration with the county party politics. And all I'm saying is that, like, there's a lot of learning that's been done. Some people have been doing this for years and years. There's a question, how much value do you get out of saying, hey, I get to be in charge of the county Republican Party. I know across my district I've got several groups of Tea Party activists that are still around, right? That movement isn't going anymore, but the learning point they had from that is they said, party politics, it's a really crazy structure. I don't want to be part of it. I want to do other stuff. So that's kind of where you guys are kind of in the gray area right now. Like, you're the America First Hillsdale Republicans, right? It's just a group that does that.
Mark.
Last question.
Well, Doug, we'll do Doug real quick.
This is, go ahead, Doug.
Just real quick, and I want to say, I mean, I followed the chats from, and I want to commend everybody that went there. I can't even imagine what it must have been like. And I really respect every single one of you a lot more. But my question would be is, I don't know, maybe I'm interpreting wrong, but like the concessions I think that were made, are we still going to have to fight them? You know what I'm saying? Are they going to come against us? Or was this made so that we can come together and heal? You know what I'm saying?
I think that's something that is going to be up to their
Only
leadership
time
and
will
up to
tell.
their
We're
leadership.
working on it,
right?
Doug.
Yeah.
I know. I just
I'll tell you this,
want to know
though.
who we're going to have to all fight against. You know what I mean?
If people want Hillsdale County to be a productive place where everybody can go out and focus on electing Trump this year,
Right.
it's going to take leadership from both teams to say, that's not the focus.
We
right
already have enough adversaries. We don't need
Yeah.
any more.
This is more of an observation because you pretty well explained Saturday. But due to the fact that we once again extended an olive branch, I had personal reservations, but the sentiment seemed to be that you guys had worked hard to bring things together and there wasn't any real opposition, so I was in. But I expected that perchance we might see some of their group here tonight. I don't see any.
Right.
Is that indicative of where we actually still stand, do you think?
This fight will be determined at the next election. If we don't get precinct delegates to come in and vote for officers, then nothing's gonna change. We've got to get precinct delegates to
Right.
vote officers that are conservative.
Can I answer to that? Can I answer to that?
And then John's gotta get off the stage, we gotta get rolling.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I remember the first night we
Thank you all.
First night I sat here when this all started, and they said, the question was, what happens if they end up with the party and it's not us? Does everybody here that was here that night remember I said not a doggone thing? Not a blooming thing. Because we're still going to meet here first Thursday of every month. We're still going to be the America First Republican Party, because Michigan compiled law 169-211-6 says that there can only be one official party, which means there can be 50 parties, but there can only be one official party. Why do we have to be the official party? Right now, when they meet, they have 15 to 16 people show up.
Not even.
Not even. Look around. Look around. So, the fact of the matter is, we know the people. They don't know the people. So even if they're the official Republican Party, and we're still going out, whether we've got precinct delegate title or not, titles mean nothing. Hard work means everything.
Right.
If we go out and knock the doors, if we go out and make the phone calls, if we go out and put the signs in, and we go out and we meet the public and we tell the public why we're voting the way we're voting, eventually we will have the precinct delegates. And in August, this thing could all be taken care of where there's only one undisputed party, and that's fine. But even if there's not, let's say there's two parties. There's the country club crew and us. Where would you rather come? I'd rather come here where I'm home with the people,
Right.
not there with the elites. So it doesn't matter. We can either come together or it doesn't matter. The thing is, I think they've got the same goal to get Trump elected. We've got a goal to get Trump elected. But more than that, it doesn't matter what happens in the presidency. It doesn't matter what happens in the governorship. It doesn't matter what happens in Lansing or Washington, D.C. What matters is what happens in your own home. Madison taught us this lesson 240-some years ago. You gotta clean your own front porch before you clean anybody else's. Everything starts at home. Let's do the local elections and stop worrying about all this white noise in Lansing and in Washington, D.C. It means nothing to us on the ground here, period. So with that, I'm gonna ask Commissioner Lanius to come up and speak for just a little bit.